I used to joke that dating in America felt like applying for jobs you'd never want but were forced to sit through the interviews anyway. Endless swiping, awkward coffee dates, guys who only talked about themselves, or worse, the ones who ghosted after pretending to plan a future. By the time I turned 24, I was exhausted. I'd gone through enough first dates to last me a lifetime, and every time I tried to convince myself that maybe this one is different, it always circled back to disappointment. Then I met Daniel. It wasn't through an app, which already felt like a miracle. Maya, my roommate and best friend since college, dragged me to a friend's birthday party downtown. I almost didn't go. I'd just finished a long week at work, buried in marketing campaigns for a skincare brand where I was the lowest rung on the corporate ladder. The last thing I wanted was to squeeze into a crowded bar full of strangers. But Maya had that persuasive tone she always used. Liv, you never know who you'll meet. And that night, she was right. Daniel was standing near the bar, wearing a dark blue button-down, sleeves rolled to his forearms, laughing with his friend Tyler. He didn't notice me at first, and I tried not to notice him. But my eyes kept drifting. Something about the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, approachable but sharp, pulled me in. Maya caught me staring and elbowed me before whispering, "He's single." I rolled my eyes. You always say that. But later that night, he walked up to me with 2 glasses of champagne and said, "You looked like you needed a refill." That was it. Simple, casual, not the forced lines I was used to. We talked for almost an hour, and for once, it didn't feel like an interview. Daniel actually listened. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my ridiculous obsession with true crime documentaries. I learned he was a financial consultant, originally from Chicago, now building his career in New York. He had this balance of seriousness and humor, like he could talk about stock portfolios 1 second and then joke about how he once accidentally wore mismatched shoes to an important client meeting. For the first time in years, I felt myself relax around someone new. After the party, Daniel asked for my number. Not in the "I'll text you later" way that usually meant never, but in a straightforward, steady tone, as if he meant it. And true enough, he called me 2 days later. Not a text, not a DM, a real phone call. That alone felt old-fashioned and charming. Over the next few weeks, we went out 3 times. Dinner at a cozy Italian place, a walk through Central Park, and even a random Tuesday night where we grabbed tacos from a food truck and ended up talking for hours on a park bench. Each time, I peeled back another layer of him, and every layer made me think, maybe this is it. But there were moments, small ones, that made me pause. Like the night at the Italian restaurant. A couple of women at the next table were laughing loudly, clearly tipsy. Daniel leaned closer to me and said with a grin, "Some people just don't know how to handle themselves. Not really the kind of women you'd bring home to your parents, huh?" I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off, but something about his tone stuck with me. It wasn't cruel, exactly, but it had an edge. A judgment that felt heavier than just a joke. Then there was another time, when we talked about college life. I joked about how my roommate back then had a revolving door of boyfriends. Daniel chuckled, but then said, "Yeah, you know. I've always thought girls with too much history kind of lose their shine." He said it lightly, like it was just an opinion, but I froze inside. I didn't know what to say. My history wasn't scandalous, but it wasn't squeaky clean either. I'd dated, I'd made mistakes, I'd slept with people I thought I loved at the time. It wasn't something I broadcasted, but it was part of who I was. His words made me wonder, what would he think of me if he knew? Still, Daniel had this way of making me feel seen, even cherished, in all the other moments. And maybe that's why I chose to ignore those warning signs. Because when you've been searching for something real for so long, it's easy to convince yourself that little red flags are just harmless quirks. One Friday night, I sat on the couch with Maya, sipping wine after work. I couldn't stop smiling at my phone. Daniel had texted, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I have a surprise planned." "You're glowing," Maya teased, raising her glass. Looks like Mr. Financial Consultant is doing something right. He just feels different, I admitted. Like he actually sees me. Maya arched an eyebrow. Liv, you've said that before. I know, I sighed. But this time, it feels real. She gave me that skeptical look only best friends can give. Just promise me you'll keep your eyes open. Sometimes the guys who seem perfect are the ones with the most hidden cracks. I nodded, though part of me wanted to roll my eyes. But late that night, lying in bed, I remembered Daniel's comment about girls with too much history. I replayed it in my mind, over and over. And for the first time since meeting him, I felt a flicker of unease. Still, I told myself tomorrow would prove me right. Tomorrow, I'd see if Daniel was truly the man I hoped he was, or if he'd be just another disappointment. And maybe, deep down, I was already afraid of the answer. The next evening, I found myself sitting in Chloe's apartment, clutching a glass of Cabernet while trying not to unravel. Chloe had always been my truth-teller, the friend who never sugar-coated reality, even when I begged her to. She was bold where I hesitated, confident where I wavered. If anyone could cut through my swirling thoughts about Daniel, it was her. So, Chloe said, curling her legs on the couch, this is, what, date number 4 with this guy? Are we talking just casual, or are we talking future wedding Pinterest boards? I laughed, but it came out thinner than I meant. Somewhere in between, I guess. He's different. Mature. Steady. Like, when I'm with him, it doesn't feel like I'm wasting my time. Chloe raised her brows. That's a low bar, Liv. Not wasting your time? Girl, you deserve fireworks, not just steady. I swirled the wine in my glass, staring at the deep red liquid. It's more than that. He listens. He plans actual dates. He doesn't just want to hang out at midnight and see what happens. That's already a miracle, she muttered. Then her sharp eyes narrowed. But you're holding something back. Spill. I sighed, setting the glass down. It's little things he says. Nothing major, but they stick with me. Like he made this comment about girls with too much history losing their shine. It was offhand, but... Oh God, Chloe interrupted, rolling her eyes. One of those guys. I frowned. What do you mean? Men who want all the perks of a modern relationship but still cling to some outdated purity checklist. They'll brag about their own wild college days, but if a woman has the same experience? Suddenly she's not wife material. Her words stung, maybe because they echoed the fear I hadn't admitted out loud. I leaned back, pressing the cool glass against my lips. What if he asks me? About my past, I mean. Then you tell him the truth. Or you don't. It's your story, not a resume you owe anyone. But what if he, my voice dropped, almost a whisper. What if he judges me? Chloe leaned forward, her expression softening. Liv, listen. You've lived. You've loved, you've made mistakes, you've learned. That doesn't make you less valuable. The right guy won't care about the number. He'll care about who you are now. I wanted to believe her. But the way Daniel's words had cut into me lingered. Girls with too much history lose their shine. I kept hearing it, like an echo in the back of my mind. Chloe must have seen the doubt on my face, because she added, I've seen this before. Guys like Daniel can be charming, even attentive. But sometimes charm hides control. They put women on a pedestal, and the second reality doesn't match their fantasy, they push them off. I shook my head. He doesn't seem controlling. Just traditional, maybe. Tradition is fine when it's mutual. But if he wants a virgin bride while he's out there with a body count of 20, that's not tradition. That's hypocrisy. Her bluntness made me wince. Still, deep down, I knew she was right. Later that night, after too much wine and too many snacks, Chloe and I lay sprawled across her couch watching reruns of Friends. She'd fallen asleep with her arm draped over her face, while I stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the anxiety pressing against my chest. What scared me wasn't just Daniel's comment, it was how much I cared about it. I'd dated guys before and shrugged off their opinions. But with Daniel, the possibility of being judged, of being dismissed as unworthy, felt terrifying. Because I wanted him to see me as worthy. The next morning, as I trudged back to my apartment, Maya was at the kitchen table scrolling her phone. She glanced up, grinning. Morning after glow or morning after dread? I dropped my bag with a groan. Neither. Just, morning after overthinking. She tilted her head. Daniel? Always. I filled her in on my night with Chloe, the wine-fueled confessions, the warnings about double standards. Maya listened quietly, then said, she's not wrong. But also, don't sabotage something that hasn't even happened yet. Has he actually asked you about your past? No. Then maybe don't hand him ammunition before he does. Enjoy what you have now. If he's really the one, it won't matter. Her advice was gentler than Chloe's, less sharp, but both carried truth. The problem was, I didn't know which truth to believe. That weekend, Daniel surprised me with tickets to a rooftop jazz show. It was beautiful, twinkling lights over the city, live music filling the night air. For a while, I let myself sink into it, savoring the warmth of his hand in mine, the way he leaned down to whisper a joke in my ear. For a while, I let myself believe this was what it meant to finally find something real. But as I stood there beneath the city skyline, I couldn't shake the weight of Chloe's words. Hidden cracks. Hypocrisy. Control disguised as charm. I smiled at Daniel when he looked at me, but inside, a question simmered I couldn't push away. If he knew everything about me, would he still be holding my hand? And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. I wasn't nervous walking into the restaurant that night. At least, I told myself I wasn't. Daniel had invited me to dinner with his friends, Tyler, his longtime best friend, and Ethan, a colleague from work. Maya was coming too, which made me feel less like an outsider. It was the first time I'd be part of Daniel's circle, the kind of night that could either stitch me closer to his life or prove I was still standing on the edges. The restaurant was one of those modern places with exposed brick walls, dim lights, and craft cocktails with names I couldn't pronounce. When we arrived, Tyler clapped Daniel on the shoulder and gave me a grin. So this is Olivia, huh? The famous girl we'd been hearing about. I smiled politely, shaking his hand, while Daniel slipped his arm around my waist. Yeah, this is her, he said proudly, as though presenting me. That small gesture eased something in me. The conversation started light. Ethan complained about a client who couldn't tell the difference between stocks and bonds, Maya cracked jokes about the tiny portions on our plates, and Tyler shared a story about Daniel getting lost during a hiking trip. I laughed more than I expected. For a moment, it felt easy, like I was finally blending into a space that could someday be mine. But then, as often happens with too much wine and too many stories, the tone of the table shifted. Tyler leaned back in his chair, smirking. All right, let's stir the pot a little. Everyone's favorite question, body count. Who's brave enough to go first? The table erupted in laughter and groans. Come on, man, Ethan said, shaking his head. We're not in college anymore. Exactly, Tyler shot back. Which means nobody should care, right? Unless they've got something to hide. My stomach tightened. Maya rolled her eyes. That's so childish. But Tyler was persistent. Fine, I'll start. 6. No shame in that. He glanced at Daniel, grinning. Your turn, man. Daniel chuckled and sipped his drink. 13. The number rolled off his tongue casually, like it was a fun fact. Nobody blinked. Ethan shrugged and gave his number. Then Tyler turned his eyes on me. What about you, Olivia? The air seemed to shift instantly. Maya sat up straighter, her face tense. Why does it matter? She snapped. It's just a game, Tyler said, smirking. We're all adults here. Daniel didn't say anything at first, but I felt his gaze on me, curious, waiting. Not mocking, not defensive, just expectant. That hurt more. I could have lied. I could have laughed it off or refused to answer. But something in the silence told me the truth was already clawing its way out. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I reached for my glass of water, stalling, but everyone was still watching. 8, I said finally, my voice steady though my hands trembled beneath the table. The table went quiet. Tyler whistled low. Ethan gave an awkward cough. Maya immediately jumped in, her voice sharp. So what? You want to hand out gold stars for being a monk? Jesus, grow up. I wanted to thank her, but I couldn't look away from Daniel. He wasn't glaring. He wasn't smiling either. His expression was unreadable, his lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded once, like he'd just filed away the information in some mental folder. And suddenly, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't in years. The rest of the dinner moved on, jokes, dessert, more drinks, but I barely heard any of it. Every time I caught Daniel's eyes, I searched for a clue, some sign of what he was thinking. But his face was smooth, controlled. Too controlled. When we finally left, Maya walked beside me, muttering under her breath. That was so unfair. He shouldn't have let it go there. I forced a smile, but my chest was heavy. It's fine. But it wasn't. Daniel drove me home, and the silence between us was thick. The city lights flickered across his face, casting shadows that made him look unfamiliar. My hands were folded in my lap, nails digging into my palm. When he pulled up in front of my apartment, he finally spoke. You didn't have to answer if you didn't want to. The words sounded kind, but his tone wasn't. It was tight, clipped. I didn't want to lie, I said softly. He didn't reply. Just nodded once, eyes fixed on the steering wheel, before saying goodnight. I stepped out of the car with my heart pounding, my mind spinning. I told myself maybe I was imagining the change in his demeanor. Maybe tomorrow he'd call and laugh about it, reassure me it didn't matter. But deep down, I knew something had cracked open between us at that dinner table. Something fragile, something dangerous. And as I stood on the curb watching his taillights disappear, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that my truth had just cost me more than I could bear. The night after the dinner, I could hardly sleep. My sheets twisted around me as if they were trying to hold me still, but my mind refused to quiet. Every moment replayed, the laughter, the question, my answer. But what haunted me most wasn't the silence that followed, or even Tyler's smirk. It was Daniel's face. That blank, unreadable expression, as though he was masking something far heavier than he let on. The next day, I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe he was just surprised. Maybe he needed time to process. But when Daniel texted, asking if I wanted to come over that evening, my stomach clenched instead of fluttered. His apartment was spotless, as always. A neat row of books lined his shelf, a bottle of whiskey gleamed on the counter, everything in its place. Daniel himself looked the same, button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, hair combed perfectly. But his eyes didn't soften when they landed on me. We sat across from each other, the city glowing behind him through the window. For a few minutes, we made small talk about work, about traffic, about anything except the dinner. Then he set his glass down with a deliberate clink and leaned forward. Olivia, he began, his voice measured, I've been thinking about what you said last night. I held my breath, waiting. I like you, he continued. You're smart, you're funny, you're beautiful. I meant it when I told my friends you're someone special. My chest tightened with hope, but it was short-lived. His next words dropped like a stone. But when you said 8. I don't know. Something shifted for me. I blinked. Shifted? He nodded slowly, choosing his words with precision. I'm not judging you. I've always imagined settling down with someone different. Someone who hasn't lived quite so much already. The word stung sharper than any insult could. Different? What does that even mean? Someone with less baggage, he said, his tone calm, as if he were explaining a financial report. Someone who hasn't been with so many guys before me. I want a wife, Olivia. A partner I can build a family with. And I need to be honest, I'm not sure you fit that picture. It was like he had pulled the floor out from under me. My fingers curled into fists against my knees. So I'm not wife material, because I've had relationships before you? He didn't flinch at my anger. If anything, his expression grew firmer. It's not just me. Most men don't want to marry a woman who's experienced like that. It makes things complicated. It's not personal, it's just reality. Not personal. Just reality. I stared at him, a hot rush of shame rising in my throat, but beneath it something else burned, fury. Daniel, you bragged about your 13 last night. Everyone laughed. No one cared. And yet my number makes me unworthy of being your wife? That's different, he said flatly. Why? My voice cracked, louder than I intended. Because you're a man? His silence was answer enough. I felt my chest cave in, as though all the air had been sucked from the room. Every tender moment we'd shared, every walk, every laugh, every kiss, it all shattered under the weight of his words. He hadn't seen me as a whole person. He'd seen me as a resume to evaluate, a checklist to complete. And with one number, I had failed his test. I stood, my hands trembling. Do you even hear yourself? You're punishing me for being honest. For being human. Daniel rose too, his face tightening. I'm not punishing you. I'm being honest about what I want. Isn't that what you'd prefer? Honesty? The calm in his voice made me feel even smaller, as though he was the reasonable one and I was hysterical for daring to argue. I wanted to scream, to throw the glass sitting on his counter, to tear down his perfect facade. But instead, I forced my voice steady. Honesty is good, I said quietly. But cruelty disguised as honesty? That's something else entirely. For a flicker of a second, I saw something shift in his eyes, maybe regret, maybe doubt, but it vanished just as quickly. He stepped back, putting distance between us. I think we should take some space. Figure out what we really want. The finality in his tone broke something inside me. I grabbed my coat, my bag, anything I could hold, and walked out. My heart thudded painfully as I rode the elevator down, each ding of the floor counter reminding me how fast my world had tilted. Outside, the air was bitter cold, the wind slicing across my cheeks. I pulled my coat tighter, but nothing could warm the hollow ache in my chest. Not wife material. The words looped endlessly in my mind, twisting into every insecurity I'd buried. I thought about every past relationship, every choice I'd made, every night I'd tried to convince myself I was doing the right thing for me. Now, standing alone on the freezing sidewalk, I wondered if all those choices had led me here, unworthy in the eyes of someone I dared to hope was different. But as the tears threatened to fall, another thought cut through the despair. If Daniel couldn't accept my past, then maybe he didn't deserve a place in my future. And though it hurt like hell, that truth settled in my chest with a clarity I couldn't ignore. The days after that conversation with Daniel blurred into a haze I couldn't shake off. I went to work, answered emails, sat in meetings, but everything felt muted, like someone had turned the world's volume down. His words replayed in my mind on an endless loop, not wife material. I hated how deeply it cut. I hated how, despite everything Chloe had warned me, despite Maya's gentle reminders, I had still allowed Daniel's opinion to matter more than my own sense of self. The shame wasn't just about the number I'd confessed at that dinner, it was about how easily I'd handed over my worth to someone else. One night, Maya found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a half-eaten bowl of pasta. She pulled out the chair across from me, her expression soft. "Liv, you haven't said 2 words all week. You need to talk." I shook my head. There's nothing to say. He told me what he thinks. And I can't stop thinking maybe he's right. Maybe I've ruined myself. Maybe I should have been more careful. Maya leaned forward, eyes blazing. Don't you dare do that to yourself. You've lived your life. You made choices that made sense to you at the time. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. Her words should have comforted me, but instead, tears stung my eyes. But what if those choices mean I'll never be enough for someone? What if they all think like him? Then they're not worth your time, she snapped, her voice firm. And Daniel sure as hell isn't. The conviction in her tone startled me, and for a moment, I envied her certainty. I wished I could borrow it for myself. Later that week, Chloe invited me out for drinks, insisting I needed fresh air and strong cocktails. We sat at a noisy rooftop bar, the city spread out beneath us. She ordered tequila shots before I could argue. All right, she said, slamming her glass on the table, tell me everything. I poured it out. The conversation at his apartment, the coldness in his voice, the way he'd reduced me to a number. Chloe listened, her jaw tightening with every detail. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. You know what this is? Classic double standard. Men like Daniel want saints in the streets but forgive themselves for everything. It's hypocrisy, plain and simple. I swallowed hard. What if it's not hypocrisy? What if it's just how men are? Chloe's eyes flashed. Don't you dare generalize. Ethan doesn't think that way. Plenty of guys don't. Stop giving Daniel the power to define every man on earth. I frowned. Ethan? She smirked. Funny you mention him. I actually ran into him yesterday. He asked how you were doing. That caught me off guard. He did? Yeah. And he didn't sound surprised by Daniel's behavior. In fact, he hinted that Daniel has a bit of a reputation. I leaned closer. What kind of reputation? Chloe shrugged, sipping her drink. Sleeping around, bragging about women, making comments behind their backs. Apparently, he's known in his office for being traditional when it suits him, but not exactly saintly himself. The words landed like a punch. All this time, Daniel had been measuring me against some impossible standard while hiding behind his own carefully curated image. I thought about the way he'd looked at me across that dinner table, as though my truth had tainted me. And yet, if Chloe was right, he'd been living a double life all along. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. The weight of it all, the hypocrisy, the unfairness, hit me like a tidal wave. Later that night, walking back to my apartment, I felt something inside me shift. The shame that had suffocated me for days began to crack, replaced by something sharper. Anger. How dare he decide my worth while ignoring his own history? How dare he reduce me to a single number while inflating his ego with stories of conquest? I had spent days drowning in regret, questioning every choice I'd made, when the truth was clear, the problem wasn't me. It was him. Back at home, Maya was sprawled on the couch watching TV. I sat beside her, my pulse still racing. Did you know Daniel has a reputation? I asked suddenly. She muted the screen. What do you mean? I told her everything Chloe had shared. Maya listened quietly, then nodded. Honestly? That doesn't surprise me. I've always felt there was something off about the way he talked about women when he thought no one was paying attention. I stared at her. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted you to see it for yourself, she said gently. If I'd warned you, you wouldn't have believed me. But now you know. She was right. As painful as it was, I needed to see Daniel's cracks with my own eyes. That night, lying awake in bed, I realized something important. Regret had been eating me alive, but regret was exactly what Daniel wanted me to feel. If I believed I was broken, if I believed I wasn't wife material, then he'd be proven right. And I refused to give him that power. For the first time in days, I closed my eyes and felt a spark of defiance burning inside me. Tomorrow, I would stop apologizing for my past. Tomorrow, I would reclaim myself. I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The morning sun poured through the blinds, washing my room in light that felt almost symbolic. For too long, I'd let Daniel's words echo inside me like a verdict. But now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry over them anymore. I wanted to fight them. That decision carried me through the day. I went into the office, held my head higher, and for the first time since that awful dinner, I didn't flinch when coworkers asked me about weekend plans. I had been shrinking into myself, trying to disappear, but I wasn't going to live small anymore. By evening, I knew what I had to do. I texted Daniel. "We need to talk. In person." His reply came quickly, "Sure. My place, 8 p.m. Walking up to his apartment later that night, my stomach twisted with nerves. But this time it wasn't fear of being judged. It was anticipation, because I finally knew I wasn't here to beg for acceptance. I was here to tell the truth. Daniel greeted me at the door, his usual easy smile plastered on like nothing had happened. "Hey, Liv. Come in." I stepped inside, refusing to soften at the sound of his voice. "This won't take long." He raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. "Okay, what's on your mind?" I looked him in the eyes, steady and unwavering. "You told me I'm not wife material because of my past. Do you know how much those words crushed me? Do you have any idea what it's like to be reduced to a number by someone you thought saw you as more?" His smile faltered. "I was just being honest. I can't change what I value." "No," I cut him off sharply. "You weren't being honest. You were being cruel. And hypocritical." He blinked. "Excuse me?" I stepped closer. "Don't act surprised. People talk, Daniel. About you. About the way you've treated women. About your own history that you conveniently forget when you're judging mine." His face hardened, but I pressed on. "I've spent weeks tearing myself apart because of what you said. But the truth is, my past doesn't make me less. It makes me real. It makes me someone who's lived, who's loved, who's been hurt, and who's still standing. That's more wife material than pretending to be perfect while hiding skeletons in the closet." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. His jaw tightened, and I could see the defensiveness rising in his eyes. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't here to win him back. "I don't regret my past," I said firmly. "I regret letting you convince me I should." He scoffed, trying to regain control of the conversation. "So what, you think you're above being judged? Relationships are about standards, Olivia. I'm allowed to have mine." "Then keep them," I replied, my voice steady. "Because I don't want to meet them. Not anymore." I turned toward the door. He called after me, "You're making a mistake." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and glanced back. "No, Daniel. For once, I'm not." The walk out of his apartment felt like walking out of a cage. My chest was light, my lungs free. By the time I hit the sidewalk, the night air filled me with a sense of relief so sharp it almost hurt. I pulled out my phone and called Chloe. She answered on the second ring. "Well?" "It's over," I said simply. There was a pause, then a whoop loud enough to make me laugh for the first time in days. "Hell yes. My girl's back." When I got home, Maya was waiting on the couch with 2 mugs of tea. She took one look at my face and smiled knowingly. "You told him, didn't you?" "I did," I said, sinking into the cushions beside her. "And for the first time, I don't feel broken." We clinked mugs together, a quiet toast to survival, to defiance, to choosing myself. Later that night, lying in bed, I thought about the past weeks, the shame, the tears, the doubt. They hadn't disappeared, but they no longer owned me. Daniel's words had once felt like the final chapter of my story. But now I realized they were just a plot twist, one that forced me to confront something I should have known all along: my worth was never up for debate. I was not a number. I was not defined by the men who came before. And I was not at the mercy of someone else's standard. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep smiling. Not because I had a perfect love story, but because I had finally reclaimed myself. And that was the kind of happy ending I hadn't realized I needed all along.